So today we're joined on the spotlight by Amanda Steele, the Group Executive Head of Property for ISPT. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
A pleasure. Thank you.
So I thought just to start off, if we could sort of get a quick corporate overview on how you ended up in your role today.
So I've been at ISPT now for 2 years in the property role. I've loved it. ISPT is a large property company, diverse unlisted property company that's owned by superannuation companies. I love it because of the purpose-driven approach. So 50% of working Australians have their money invested into ISPT properties, which is great. And I knew the company very well because they were a big client of mine when I was at CBRE. So it was a wonderful kind of step for me in my career to go across. They were the CEO changed to Chris Chappell, who was a fantastic leader, and I was delighted to go and work with Chris and his team around the transformation agenda for a company that I loved.
Recently you spoke to Women in Property about how you use creativity in your role. Yes. I was just wondering how that skill supports you in your day-to-day as Group Executive Head.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that creativity one. I think for a lot of people outside of property, they don't realise just how creative it is. And I also think that in leadership roles, you have to be creative. It's just problem after problem after problem. And I think if you're solving it with the same solution, you're not getting very far. So I think that creativity piece is crucial for good leadership and for growth in an organisation. I didn't do my degree in property. I actually did my degree in arts, public policy and international politics. Right. But I think that you can apply any kind of critical thinking and creative thinking to a corporate career, and that's what I've done.
How do you go from public policy to property though? I mean...
From my degree, I really focused on systems and political systems, how they worked or how they didn't work, what an economic system looked like and how it could include or exclude people. So from there I went into sustainability and really from a community development background. And I think if I look at my entire life, really, even as a child, I've been fascinated by systems and how they work. That sustainability piece set me up beautifully for a career in property. I was in finance, insurance, I'd worked in government, not-for-profit. I was tapped on the shoulder to join Stockland, which was a great experience. And being in property, you are working in a really big system. You're problem solving all the time. How does development fit with operations? How does operations fit with funds? Like, how does that all work together? So I think my career or my learning in politics and public policy helped me to really creatively solve for some of those property problems.
How has the industry changed since you started with Stockland?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. And thankfully, I would say positively. Yeah. So that focus on ESG has become like the seatbelt in cars. Like it's just a quality requirement that you've actually got the necessity to be focused on sustainability.
You can't think of it without it anymore, can you?
No, you really can't. It's a quasi for quality management, I think, great sustainability performance. So that's really changed. That's become par for the course, which is fantastic. I remember very early on in my career, one of my mentors said to me that my exposure in that sustainability space, which gave me access to decision makers and boards, would set me up in my future in my career, and it has. It absolutely has. So that's really changed. Thankfully, there's many more women in the industry, still a lot more needed in some certain sectors, and capital markets is the one that it always comes up, and the investment space. So more women in the industry, which is great, and I think that has lifted the sophistication and quality of the industry. And then I think the technology piece, we still have a long way to come. And there's huge opportunity there.
What are some of the technical developments that you're noticing in the industry come in?
So the AI piece is something that everyone's talking about. I think it's a term that's thrown around with a lot of carelessness, to be really honest. Yeah. I think we've been doing machine learning for a really long time, and I think automation has been around for a really long time. I think the gaps that we currently have in property and AI, and that need to be fixed before we can really adopt AI to our own benefit, is that process piece, really understanding where our roles and responsibilities sit so that we can really adopt AI in a useful way. Because property is creative and because you've got so many diverse people working within it, we can fall outside a process. Yeah. So coming from a finance and insurance background, very process driven, like everyone knows exactly their role and it's very clear. As a result, finance is way far ahead in the fintech space compared to property in the prop tech space. So I think that there's a lot for us to do there. It will provide us not just with an efficiency, but a simplicity in how we can provide buildings and services, and allow us to focus on the more high value parts of our business, which is engaging with people.
100%. I mean, people make up, the most interesting part of the property industry. You've got so many different characters and people setting out to do and achieve such amazing things. Now, while we were talking, I noticed you spoke about ESG, creativity, and sort of that operational and strategic thinking. What are some of the other characteristics that you think have contributed to your success over the years?
I would say resilience is one. I think resilience is an attribute that's really required as you go further up in an organisation. I also think, unfortunately, not just in property, but being a woman in the corporate sector it requires resilience, or has in the past. I'd love to think that that's not going to be a requirement going forward, but I do think resilience is an attribute that I have that has held me in good stead. And then I think it comes with resilience actually, is a sense of humour, not taking things too seriously, putting things into perspective.
We spoke earlier about how your career with ESG started in finance and insurance. Was there anything surprising in your transition to property, maybe beyond the sort of regulatory side that you noticed when you made that transition?
Yeah, and I think that's the joy of working in different sectors. When I was in government, it was very much around policy, as you'd expect. So great governance and good policy. And that's a skill set that has held me in good stead in every part of my career. Finance and insurance was excellent at strategy. So everything they did was tied back to strategy. Everyone was clear on what the strategy was and their part within it. And I think that's a skill set that's still kind of missing in property a lot. What I found when I went across to property that I loved was the pace. Everything happens at pace, and that's fantastic because you're moving really quickly. And what I really enjoy about property is the transparency. So I would find in insurance and finance that you would be in a meeting and you'd put your position forward, people would go, yes, of course, that's great, thank you. And then you walk out of the room and they go, there's no way I'm going to do that. Whereas in property, people would say, that's a really dumb idea, we're not going to do that. So it gives you the opportunity to discuss it.
Oh, yeah.
Which I really love. I love that about property.
You're not going to develop a new idea if they can't, sort of give that real-time feedback.
Yeah, the testing of it. Exactly. Yeah. That's the joy of property, I think.
And the testing always, you'll always come up with a better product if there's a bit of discourse over it and stuff like that.
I agree.
As part of, I guess, being a leader in ISPT and across other roles throughout your career, how has that strategic thinking that I guess you got from working in finance and insurance been able to translate to seeing a bigger picture for the future of a company?
I think it's really important that you can set that strategy, which often has to have a solid vision. Where are we going to? How will we get there? And if you can really build that narrative and build it so that people can see where they are in that narrative and what role they play in it, it gets an entire organisation heading in the right direction and towards a common goal. So, strategy is about deciding what you're focusing on and what differentiates you ultimately. And I think that's really important in the property space.
Wonderful. For students who want to go into those sort of strategic roles or even people in their early careers, do you have any tips on how you can develop your strategic thinking or just generally how you pitch a strategy to your team?
Yeah. I think that that ability to tell a story is really important. I think when you're dealing with strategy, it can be very convoluted and confusing. And so you need to synthesize the information so that you're providing a compelling story that people can associate with. And so I think my advice to graduates who are coming through that are wanting to get into that strategy space is to not get caught up in word salad. It's not big words thrown together that you throw together and put out there, to be really simplified in how you communicate what you're suggesting and how people can contribute to that suggestion.
As a leader, when you're looking at people coming into different careers and stuff like that, and especially in the early stage, what is sort of a piece of advice that you wish you had when you were starting out?
One piece of advice that's really valuable is always bring the solution, not just the problem. So we always seek the input, absolutely that collaboration piece, and if you've got a problem, you should definitely talk about it. But I think the challenge is, as a boss or a leader or a manager or anyone in an organisation, if you have someone come in and say to you, this is the problem, full stop, that all of a sudden is a burden to the leader, rather than this is the problem, I'm thinking maybe it's this, could it be this, maybe I should speak to this person. It shows that you're thinking about where to go to next, what else could happen. And so that would be my advice, and something that I wish I had known, that to bring the solution, not just the problem.
That's very good advice. That's it's sort of half solving the problem and opening it, or making it open for feedback, as you said earlier, and getting that discourse, which is obviously very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there something since joining ISPT that has surprised you about the culture and the values of the company?
I'm really surprised and delighted by just how purpose-driven the organisation is.
That's wonderful.
So it's got a 30-year history and formed by superannuation firms, as I mentioned, but 50% of working Australians' superannuation is tied up in ISPT buildings. And so that is really prevalent in the culture. People take that very serious, the responsibility of looking after working Australians' funds.
That's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, huge. And so I'm delighted by just how purpose-driven the organisation is and how front of mind it is for people. There's a real push for performance, but that push for performance is for working Australians. So what a great combination to have in an organisation. I feel very lucky. Yeah,
I definitely got that sense when we visited your offices. Yeah. That was like, and the passion at which you speak about your projects and the care that you take with them. There was an industrial site that the team had mentioned, and you guys reused some of the brick from it so that, it hits that sustainability, but also it kept with the heritage of the site. And that site had such an interesting heritage.
Yes.
That just the care that you took of the properties was amazing.
Yeah, beautiful.
Witness firsthand.
Yeah, that's nice. They are a great team and very passionate about reusing where we can. That circular economy piece is a big focus for our future ESG strategy as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So ISPT's ESG strategy actually started back in 2005.
Yes.
20 years on, we're obviously seeing such a huge amount of growth. Where do you want to see it maybe in the next 5 years?
Stephen Peters is an absolute leader in this space. That circular economy piece is really important, how we reuse fixtures and fittings, blinds, ceiling tiles, office furniture. We've got some great case studies on what we've done there at 477 Pitt Street and 500 Burke. And as a result of that, we've partnered with the Green Building Council around what we can do in that circular economy space. So I think that's a big focus. ISPT was the first carbon neutral property company in Australia.
Wow.
Which no one knows about.
That's such an achievement.
Yeah, it is a huge achievement. And I think what I would really like to see is that we're better known for our achievements in ESG, because I feel it's something our investors are very proud of. I feel it's something that our people are very proud of. Our tenant partners really prize the fact that they're in buildings that can contribute to their sustainability conversations. Yeah. And I would really like us to be better known for it, because I think it's such a positive story for us to tell.
And once again, it kind of shows that responsibility. You've got 50% of working Australians that you guys take care of, but you're also taking care of the land that they're going to be using for another 100,000 years.
Yes, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, my mother always says to me, I hope you're not drinking cocktails, that's my superannuation. It's all right, I'm not. But my mother's superannuation is in one of the funds. But we do take that very seriously. You don't want working Australians' superannuation tied up in poorly constructed, poor environmental or social impact assets. So that needs to be delivered with a great deal of care and consideration. And what we have found is that those buildings with better ESG credentials lease quicker, have higher valuation, are in better locations, are more desirable. So the actual productivity and performance of those assets is critical.
Yeah. Do you think it was harder to become carbon neutral or to maintain it?
I think in the early days it was very difficult to become carbon neutral. Okay. I think some of the work that the ESG team have done around renewable energy generation that we have on a lot of our sites has really contributed to our ability to maintain it well. And then the operations of our assets, making sure we have our neighbours' energy, waste and water ratings at a very high level, ensuring that we're building for great Green Star outcomes, that's allowed us to continue to deliver that quite comfortably.
As you said, property moves quickly, but you guys seem to be ahead of the curve on all this.
Yeah, that's it's impressive.
Now, before this, you also spent some time at some other very well-known companies such as CBRE, Stockland and Suncorp, along with IAG as well.
Yes.
What are some of the stories you have from those other roles you've held?
Yeah, I mean, I've been so lucky in my career, really, when you look at those brands and companies, and all have been so impressive. when I look at the leaders that I was surrounded by, I was incredibly lucky. I had Ray Pittman at CBRE who put me into a senior role and he took a real gamble on me. I had a team of 5 when I went into the head of property management, which was a team of 500, so it was a big step up. But I had great support from him, and I think that that's a real lesson, how you support new leaders into those roles. In Stockland, I really loved that organisation because they were leaders in ESG, and it was a big organisation, purpose-driven again as well. And just the quality of the team that I had around me was unbelievable. You know, I had Davina Rooney, who's now the CEO of the Green Building Council.
Oh, wow.
I had Margot Black, who's now at Investor in the sustainability space. Romana James, who's head of sustainability at Dexus. Like, there's just this incredible diaspora of super talented people from Stockland. So
and
very
lucky.
lucky.
To do some very interesting things.
Very impressive.
Was there anything like a trait or something amongst that group that you saw that it made the group work well?
Yep.
But also, you know, that kind of said, okay, these are some superstars who are going to go on.
Yeah.
Really cool things.
Yep. I think that there's 2 things there. One, very collegiate, really great collaborators, that team. So across the board, every part of the business. So really, really collegiate and collaborative. But the other piece that I think is unusual in that space that they were very good at was the commercial nature of what they were delivering. So you don't want ESG or any, you know, marketing or any kind of separate part of the commercial drivers of a business to not understand deeply what those commercial drivers are. And so that sustainability team at Stockland were part of the development team where they were sitting in the PCGs, they were having the conversations with the leasing agents, they were in front of investors. So we were very much driven by the commerciality of what we needed to provide.
Early in your career and trying to get into different teams and stuff like that, how do you sort of break the ice, I guess, so that you can become part of that team and collaborate and, you know, work to the best of your ability?
Yeah, I think it's about curiosity. I think you have to have a really great curious mindset.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do have it and are hesitant to share that curiosity. But I think when you're establishing yourself in a career or in a new role, being curious about the people that you're working with, not just what they're wanting to achieve or what their day-to-day work is, but where have they come from and what's important to them personally. If you can build that connection with genuine curiosity, I think that you can really build that collaboration solidly. So yeah, I think that's the most important trait there.
When you became a leader, obviously moving from a team of 5 to 500, how did you define what a good leader was? And has that changed or evolved over the years after, you know, some different experiences?
Yeah, it's a really important question, you know, what is a good leader? Because my perspective of a good leader could be very different to another person's perspective. So I think that's important to recognise that you're not always going to be the best leader for everyone. I think we've all experienced good leaders and bad leaders, whether that be from primary school right through to your career. And so looking at what were the traits and being very conscious around the kind of leader I wanted to be. And I remember my first town hall session articulating what kind of leader I wanted to be. And that was around being collaborative, being open and transparent, being very, very honest, which I always was.
When presenting those, you know, moments of feedback, stuff like that. How do you learn and grow from them? And how do you want your team to learn and grow from when you give them feedback? Yeah,
and feedback, you know, people always say feedback's a gift. It's not if it's delivered badly. It's awful.
Ooh,
so I think to hear feedback, the environment has to be right. So if it's if the environment is one-sided and there's a power construct, it's very difficult to hear the feedback well. And so that trust has to be there to be able to give feedback. I've had a lot of feedback in my career, and I think it's important to be clear on what feedback I can take and use and what feedback gives me more information about the person that's giving it to me. So if it's a fundamental, you know, I don't like this about you, or I wish you would do something this way, if that's not how I can do it, or if it's my personality and I can't change it, then that's a lesson for me in how to deal with the person, not in how to change.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You have to have, I guess, to be able to recognize that, though. How was that a learning curve on recognizing, like, this is something about them versus this is something that I can change?
Yes, that's a learning curve for sure. And I've been very lucky in my career, and I would recommend it even outside of a career, doing the assessment around what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And early on in my career, when I did that strengths-based assessment, the focus was, okay, well, these are your weaknesses. How will we fix your weaknesses? Now with organisational psychology, that's shifted to you're not going to fix your weaknesses. Where are the people in your team who can supplement where you're not strong there? And how can we amplify your strengths?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really nice shift, because if you're focusing on your 10% of weaknesses rather than your 90% of positives, you're kind of missing the trick.
And you're missing the part that you're actually
really good at
and really contribute with.
That you enjoy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Your strengths are generally things you enjoy. Of course, you need to know your weaknesses and work around them. One of my weaknesses early on in my career was organisation. And I feel confident that if you spoke to anyone in my business now, they'd say, oh my gosh, that was never your weakness, because I'm much more organised than I was. I could change that. I could work on that, and that was an easy thing for me to fix. But there are other fundamental weaknesses that are personality based. So
those ones don't really need to be changed for.
I think so. Someone told me once that I was too funny, and I was like, yeah,
that's an odd thing to create. No, funny is always a good thing. You have a great working environment. You can put a smile on people's faces. No need to change that. That's wonderful. Obviously, recently in your Woman in Property interview, you took ownership of your achievements and the hard work that you've put in to achieve them.
Yeah.
On another learning curve, was that something that you had to develop that confidence to be able to, take ownership of that?
Yeah.
Or have you always naturally had that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I kind of hesitated in that interview about being so bold to say that my achievements were my own achievements.
I was very glad that you did. I thought that was really inspiring. And being able to take ownership of that as a woman in property and stuff like that, that was really cool to see as a younger person coming through the industry and seeing that you can be proud of your achievements.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And was it always something I've always had? My mother would tell you that I was always confident. But what my mother doesn't know is the millions of times a day where I question myself. Is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? So of course I doubt myself. I think the difference is in times of doubt, what I've always thought is the only person that can make the decision is me. So I've never let a decision be squandered and floated out there for others to solve. And I think that comes across as confidence. And that's what I was reflecting in that interview. The decisions that I've made have gotten me to where I am. I could list thousands of people that have contributed to my career, right from my mum, of course. And I have had the benefit of a lot of support. But each decision I've made has been my own personal decision. And I think that comes from a strong sense of self rather than confidence. Who I am and what I can do, rather than absolute confident that I will be able to do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. The strong sense of self, how do you sort of identify that? Is it your values that, kind of help guide your decisions that you take? Or?
Yeah, I think it is definitely about your personal values and what guide your decisions. I think it comes from your history and your background and the culture you've grown up in, and that ability to be resilient, to get up and go again and again and again. But I do think that's my personal values around that sense of self, being very confident, knowing who I am, what I'm good at, and being comfortable with myself and with my own company.
What are some things you want to look forward to in the future, and what's next on the horizon?
Yeah, it's a great question. As a woman in property, I'm often asked what's the next title, the next job I want. And actually, I'm not particularly interested in titles or jobs. What I loved about coming across to ISPT was Chris as a leader, and that's really important for me to have a leader that's very inspiring. And I had that at CBRE, I've had that in all of my careers. But what was more important was that there was a challenge, and I was able to see that I could contribute to solving that challenge with the team around me. And I think that will always be the next step in my career, is where can I be challenged? Where is something where I can feel a little bit uncomfortable and have a go at fixing it? So that's next on the agenda.
I feel like that feeling of being uncomfortable, though, that's just outside your comfort zone.
Yes.
That's the exciting stuff. You can really tackle those new problems.
Yeah, that's the only time you learn.
100%.
And if you've stopped learning, I think there's something wrong. So I always want to be not knowing everything, because it just makes me strive harder and harder. And that intrinsic competition, that sense of self, that is what gets me out of bed every day.
Excellent. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
When you sort of started to make the move over to ISPT and you saw Chris's leadership style, what was something that, made you resonate with the strategy that he was putting forward and the goals he was setting for the company?
This will sound strange. It was his comfort with love. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So very early on, he talked about loving his job and loving the team. And I said to him, and we've talked about it a lot, it's actually one of our values. We love what we do, our DNA, we love what we do. And what I said to him is love is a concept that is very rarely shared in a corporate setting. Yeah. But if you actually don't love the people you work with or love what you're trying to do together, you're wasting a lot of the hours in your day. Yeah. So it's not about a replacement for my family. I see it as an extension of my day. And so I think that was one of the things that I really was very inspired by Chris, was his comfort in telling a room full of people that he loved them.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Completely resonate with that.
Yeah.
I did an internship over summer, and the first sort of roundtable meeting we had was right after Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And so one of the guys said, I spend more time in my week sometimes with you guys than with my family, which is, probably not how it should be, but that's how it is when you're working really long hours.
Yes.
And I love working with each and every one of you. Great? And I was like, this was my first or second day on
Amazing.
job. I was like, oh my gosh, what an incredible culture.
I want to work here.
Yeah, I was like, this is fantastic. And they all genuinely meant it. And
yeah.
They went around and everyone kind of contributed and just sort of, it was an amazing value. And it is odd to sort of see it in the corporate environment.
So nice though.
Some of the other values that ISPT has, and that's part of their DNA.
Yes.
You guys talk about playing to win.
Yes.
For graduates looking to join ISPT and sort of work in your environment, what's something that they can do to demonstrate that is also part of their DNA?
Yeah, so I think it is that resilience. So playing to win is not winning at any cost at all, but it's about being clear on what you can contribute to the win, being resilient about taking some feedback, about taking some knocks. And what I love to see from a graduate or anyone entering the organisation being interviewed is where they can position themselves for the growth and the success of an organisation, how they can see themselves a part of it and articulate it to you in the room. I think that's critical.
That also kind of ties into your comment earlier about, seeing the strategic vision for a company and stuff like that.
Exactly.
When graduates and people in their early careers, maybe once they're a little bit more into it and into the role, if they indicate, hey, this is where I want to be in 5 years' time, how do they present that shift in, moving along the strategy and how they make bigger decisions?
Yeah, great question. Because I think, to my earlier point, when people talk about in the next 5 years, they often say, this is the job I want in the next 5 years, or the title I want, or the salary I want. And it's very limiting. Because there's only a certain number of jobs, titles or salary that you can get. Whereas if you're looking at, I would like to expand on my financial knowledge, I'd like to be running a profit and loss, I'd like to be managing a team of people, those kind of skill sets might be more strongly associated with the jobs, the titles, the salary band, but it gives your leader the opportunity to consider other places to place you rather than to limit your career. Oh no, she doesn't want that job because it's not a senior manager. Yeah. Whereas it might have those attributes that could get you to that role that you really want.
That's a really interesting way of sort of rewiring it and rewording it.
Yeah.
But obviously it doesn't put that small circumference on what you want and allows you to be placed in different areas. Have you ever had a moment where you've indicated, hey, this is something I want to expand on or grow on, and then been placed into something that was completely different to what you thought you were going to?
Yeah, well, actually, that was the joy at CBRE, because I really wanted to move into a P&L. I wanted to move out of sustainability because I'd done it for a long time. I felt like I wasn't growing as much as I wanted to. And so rather than saying, I want this job, I was very clear and articulated often to Lisa Cooper, who I credit with a lot of my career, and to Ray, around I would like to run a P&L, and this is why I think I could talk about strategy, talk about understanding the numbers, talk about how I could see myself in a role that would contribute to the growth of the business. And so as a result of that, they said, what about property management? I was like, wow, that's a really, yes. I said, yes. And then thought, gosh, that's a big job, but said yes first. Yeah.
Wonderful. What was the biggest surprise in that transition from ESG to property management?
It was a big shift, and it was a big shift for the organisation. So that part of the business needed a real reset, and so I was associated with change. And I think the lesson that was important for me there was that you stand on the shoulders of those that come before you, so you should never criticise former leadership or the way things have been done,
100%.
and really acknowledge what needs to shift for the future rather than focusing on the past. So that was probably the biggest lesson, was being able to articulate a vision where people could come with me. And I spent a lot of time, as I do in any new role, with people throughout every level of the organisation. I think that's really critical. Rather than just the people around you, you have to go deep.
If you had to start your career again,
yes,
you kind of went back to right after uni, you just graduated, what's a piece of advice that you wish you knew, or maybe a skill that you wish you had before starting your workforce career?
Yeah, I have spoken before about the importance of knowing your strengths, and I think I wish I had had that straight after uni, really knowing where my strengths were. I think one of the skills I would have really liked was how to have those hard conversations. And so there's a great book called Crucial Conversations. I wish I'd read that book, around taking the time and taking the breath and how to articulate difficult ideas or difficult give feedback in the moment rather than walking away from it. Like, that's a skill that you have to develop. I wish I'd focused on that going into my career.
I'll add that one to my to be read list.
Yeah, great.
Wonderful. Well, it has been so good to speak with you today. And yeah, that was a wonderful piece of final advice to wrap it up on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your stories with us.
Of course. Thank you for your time.